Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to once again to the India Today Roundtable, Election Roundtable here in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, all set to go to another frenzied election campaign in a few weeks from now. Now, one of the narratives of this election campaign, and Chief Minister M.K. Stalin referred to it in his opening remarks, is that the DMK, the ruling party, wants to build a model based on a Dravidian model 2.0. What is this Dravidian model 2.0? Will it give the DMK an election victory, or will the DMK be fighting to, in a way, offset 5 years of anti-incumbency? Who better to answer that question than unarguably one of the most articulate politicians in the country? Please welcome Pannallivel Thiagarajan, Minister IT and Digital Services here in Tamil Nadu. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here in the warmth of Chennai. I want to understand, I think viewers want to understand, what is this Dravidian 2.0 model that the Chief Minister is talking about constantly? Because I recall you were one of the initial politicians who spoke about a potential Tamil Nadu model out there. What is this model and how is it linked to an election 2026?
I think we should start with giving credit where credit is due. This notion of a model for a state started with 2014 election, the alleged Gujarat model, right? That was the model based on which the country was sold this dream of, I don't know what the slogan is now or what was it then. Every election the slogan changes, but development at large scale and great outcomes. That was the alleged Gujarat model. And I remember back in 2018 or 19, it was an India Today event, but at the ITC, where I was speaking with a bunch of people, and I said, now it's been shown that the Gujarat model was quite a bad model, because multidimensional poverty is quite high, access to health is quite low, a lot of illegal migration, a lot of gaps between the rich and the poor. So per capita development was great, but otherwise it was not. And compare that to Tamil Nadu, where the per capita development is as good or better, but we have much, much better social outcomes, much better health outcomes, much better any indicator you have. And so I think it was Jairam Ramesh who first kind of said, and that was the first time you did a conclave in South India, incidentally. Till then you only did it in Delhi. Everything in India was Delhi-centric. Then you came down to Chennai. So he said, maybe there is such a thing as a Tamil Nadu model. And then over time that got kind of expanded because there's a huge amount of commonality in the South. And I say for multiple reasons. But I would say the essence of the difference of the Dravidian or Tamil Nadu model compared to the alleged Gujarat model is that we start first with social structure. We want everybody to be equal. We want social justice. We want social equity. We want equality of opportunity, and we want education to be the basis for enhancement. Just as I was walking the Chief Minister out, he mentioned that he had been at an event at the Women's Christian College yesterday. And after the fact that we have 42% or so of all women working in manufacturing are working in Tamil Nadu, 6% of the population, 42% of all of it. He said, I still emphasize to them that more of you need to get into the economy, keep on studying, keep on working, and whatever it takes to get you there, that's what I'm here to do. This notion of inclusion being at the heart of it, particularly inclusion of women, of minorities, of formerly oppressed communities, is at the heart of this model. And if you call it collectively the focus of human capital development, then it is a profoundly different model than kind of capex-led or, what can I say, central government, union government, endowed growth that you see in Gujarat, where you see a few industrialists get really, really rich and most of the people stay far behind.
Now, can I just push you for a moment? Yeah. I asked you about Dravidian model 2.0, you immediately went and contrasted it with what you called alleged Gujarat model. Why are you all obsessed with Gujarat? The idea should be Gujarat should grow. Gujarat also is growing at an extremely fast pace. Their per capita income is rising. Are you positing this Dravidian model versus the Gujarat model and saying, are you willing to go to the people of the country, not just Tamil Nadu, and say, let's choose between these two models? Do you want the Dravidian model or the Tamil Nadu model or the South model, call it what you will, versus the alleged Gujarat model? Is that how you want to shape the debate, not just in Tamil Nadu, but for the future?
I think that goes to the heart of your question, right? Is the South the future? The future is the future. The future of the South is bright. The future of the rest of the country depends the extent to which they adopt and follow the Dravidian model or the South model or the Tamil Nadu model will determine the extent to which their future is bright. Our future is bright because we have a good model. But I'm not trying to talk in absolutes. I'm saying the notion of using models as a way of projection or as a way of encapsulation was not in the politic of here till there somebody else tried to do that as a shorthand. So we also have our own model. I've told you deep philosophy, 100% inclusion, social equity, everybody gets access to education, reservation to ensure all communities get representation, and doing that properly for 100 plus years. That is our model. That model is common to a lot of South India because it used to be the Madras Presidency in the British days. Before that, we had a lot of commonality. The Vijayanagaram Empire, the Chola Empire covered lots of these places. So our culture has been intertwined for a long time. And so we came down.
Can I though challenge you on one element? That while you speak about your social indicators time and again, there are those who will say the political culture of Tamil Nadu has been marked by corruption, and this is true of other southern states as well. Massive corruption where the assets of elected leaders have grown disproportionately high. Many of them have gone to jail for their crimes. And therefore, while you speak about equality, the truth of the matter is you create a political elite which benefits and the rest of the people don't benefit necessarily to the same extent. Has this model also bred corruption, dynasticism, and the ideological values have lost out? The Dravidian ideology has lost out to this political culture of corruption.
Name me one state in India where there is not corruption and where there is not dynastic politics.
So that's a bad answer.
No, I'm not asking the question. If there is a decay in the political system, that decay is universal. I say my outcomes are better. I say my society is better. I say my development is better. You say you also have corruption. I say I may, but who doesn't? After all that, I still have better outcomes. That's the point I'm making here. Right?
No, because when I ask those who, the Narendra Modi supporters, say Narendra Modi has tried to build a Gujarat model which he has tried to make as corruption-free as possible. They claim that rent-seeking politicians are being slowly but surely marginalized in the so-called alleged Gujarat model. The Tamil Nadu model allows rent-seeking politicians to continue and flourish.
Rajdeep, you're a well-read man. I doubt it is possible that you have not read the Supreme Court judgment on the electoral bonds and who the donors were and when the timing of the donation was. Every single one of the electoral bonds was institutionalized corruption. It was either immediately after a tender, immediately before a tender, immediately after getting an ED notice, immediately after being called by the CBI. If there has been the history of institutionalized corruption in any democratic country in the world, the electoral bonds is a prime example. What are you telling me about who's eliminating corruption? Let's not go into all these, any thoughtful person will say that corruption is a problem, but it's a problem universally. It's not as if it's only a problem in developed states. Corruption is a problem every state, everywhere. Or it's not.
You also benefited from, sir, you also benefited from electoral bonds. Electoral bonds also came to the DMK.
No, that's my point. My point is that DMK got 500 crores or something. They got 8,000 something crores. And they've got PM CARES, which they say is not a government entity, but is also controlled by the PM, and is not called the Prime Minister's name. It's called Prime Minister CARES, but it's a private entity, not subject to RTI, not subject to audit. I mean, listen, this is the last kind of bastion you want to fight on, saying somehow there's purity somewhere and impurity here. If there is impurity, it's everywhere. If there isn't, it's nowhere. Right? There's no purity anywhere.
Can I though say that while you focus on this Tamil Nadu or Dravidian model with its emphasis on inclusion, it also seems to, in some way, posit itself against the center. That you don't want to accept the national education policy or the three-language formula, you're anti-Hindi, you're anti-NEET, and thereby Tamil Nadu cuts itself off from the national mainstream because you're so conscious of consciously promoting your distinctive identity. Is this identity Tamil Nadu versus Delhi?
There's 3-4 different points there. We are anti-Hindi imposition. We are not anti-Hindi, number one. We are anti-NEET and we are anti-anybody trying to tell us what exam we should use to filter or select our applicants who are our children going to our medical colleges funded with our money in a system that is by far the most superior health system of any state in India, and substantial diaspora of the proportion of the medical diaspora of India are Tamil. So we don't like being told that you have to dumb yourself down or you have to adopt a model that is inferior to our model because God says so or the dictator says so. So we have a model that works. Within the constitution, we are able to get good outcomes with our model. We don't like somebody else trying to tell us that you should do it my way when your track record is much, much worse than mine. If it's better, we're thoughtful people, we listen. But if it's not, why should we listen to your model? So if you keep telling us that you want homogeneity, the first question we ask is, first of all, why is that philosophically accurate? India is a union of states. It's many thousands of years of culture. Second, for us to even contemplate changing our way for yours, you must have done better than us. What is it that you have done better than us that we should listen to you?
You know, again, as I said, you're making it confrontational. I saw you I heard you use the word dictator. You seem to believe that Delhi is no one to dictate terms to Tamil Nadu. That Tamil Nadu, therefore, will set its own agenda.
It's not just Tamil Nadu. It's all states, right? India is a union of states. There is a there's a concurrent list, there's a union list, there's a state list. Why are the governors not signing the bills? Why is the government of India legislating into state subjects? Why are they adding extraneous conditions to the disbursement of money in a finance and appropriation bill like the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan funds, which is not in the bill? You don't get to decide. Just because you don't do 3 language, I will not give you money. It was not in the bill that said that was a condition. You said the money is going to be given. Why did you not give it? If that's not dictatorial, if that's not anti-democratic, what is it?
So the reason I'm pressing you on this is perhaps, as you said, India's linguistic diversity is its strength. Why not embrace Hindi then? Why not embrace to make the future of Tamil Nadu even stronger in the sense that a young kid
I'll make it easier for you. I'll make it easier for you. One of your other news organizations sent a reporter and he came to interview me and he said, I have some bad news for you.
Yes.
And I said, what's the bad news? He said, Hindi is being spoken in a lot of places around Tamil Nadu. I said, why is that bad news for me? Is that like you're telling me like there's some disease spreading? Whoever wants to speak Hindi, let them speak Hindi. I will not have you dictate to me that I should increase the curriculum of my government schools to 3 subjects and dilute the learning experience of my people when there is no marginal upside to me. Right? As my good friend Prakash Raj said, when I spoke to somebody in Hindi, he says, oh, you can speak Hindi. He says, yes, you speak Hindi because you know Hindi. I speak Hindi because you know only Hindi. Right? So why should we adapt to them knowing only Hindi? I'm saying, we speak our mother tongue, we speak English, it's a commercial language, it's a common language. Peraranga Anna said, why should there be 2 different doors? If there's a door for the big dog, the small dog also can go through it. So if everybody had a 2-language formula, we didn't need a 3-language formula. 3-language formula, as I keep repeating, means 1 language for the Hindi belt and 3 languages for the rest of us. Our own mother tongue, English for our commercial and employment opportunities, and Hindi to speak to those people who can only speak 1 language. Why is it fair in a democracy that some people have a 1-language formula, the rest of us have to have 3 language to adapt to the 1-language people?
Interestingly put Mr. Minister, but broadening it to the South in general, do you fear looking ahead that these states with low fertility rate, with high economic growth, could get penalized both politically and financially. You've got a potential delimitation exercise taking place in the next couple of years. It could potentially reduce the number of seats of Lok Sabha in proportional terms, possibly, that a state like Tamil Nadu sends to Delhi. The Finance Commission has given a flat 41% rate and also put certain criteria to disperse funds. Do you worry that the South could feel increasingly alienated from the rest of the country if the gap between the southern, high-growth southern states and the so-called Bimaru states continues to widen in the next 10 to 20 years?
Look, we are already at a very precarious position. Let's take the politics out of this. Let's look at the numbers, okay? Right now, the South is about 19% something of the land and roughly 19% something of the population. To be fair, we have slightly more than 20% of the representation in the Lok Sabha, right, in yes. Parliament. Because the delimitation was set back in the day when the population gaps had not widened so much. Now you look at it economically. We're about 30% of the GDP, at least, which means because taxation is progressive, we're paying between 35 and 40% of the total revenues of the government of India. And the finance commissions have increasingly kept cutting us down, with the exception of this finance commission led by my friend Professor Panagaria, which has marginally increased it from 15.8 to 17%. So 40% in, 17% back. You take, absolute numbers are not that meaningful. It's a federal society. The better off should pay more. But you take the 25-year timeline, or more than that, take the 50-year timeline from the 6th Finance Commission till the 16th. And it is a very startling trend. The rich states are getting richer, paying more tax and getting less back, and the poor states are getting poorer on a relative basis. So whatever this devolution is through money, it is not giving you what every other society gets. You go to China, the coastal provinces pay and the hinterland gets, they get closer together. You go to America, the Californias, the New York, the Washingtons pay in, and the North Dakotas, the Missouris, the Kansas get the money and they get closer together. You go to the European Union, France's, Germany's pay, and the Portugals, Greece's get the money and they get better. In India, we keep on increasing more and more money and they keep on getting worse and worse. And we have this compounding problem, which you said. Everywhere else in a federal society, the population will migrate to where the economic activity is. So you'll have a natural balancing. You'll find that high economy states are also high population states, like New York or California. In India, we have the exact opposite. High economy states are low population and declining population, low absolute and declining because of lower birth rates. And so you have this really dangerous situation. Dangerous in the sense it's not sustainable for any length of time, that you keep on having more poorer people getting more and more of the total pie and getting worse and worse. Something is profoundly wrong. It is not fixable by money. It has to be fixed by rethinking the structure of society. And there I think the Dravidian model is a meaningful model, because all over the South, we started from the days of 1920s, the notion of 100% inclusion, the right for women to vote, compulsory elementary education for boys and girls, reservation in jobs based on the percent of the population your community is, therefore universal mentorship, universal kind of coattails. That engineered society in a way that we kept benefiting. You don't do that, money can't fix your problem.
Let me once again challenge you. While you keep repeating the importance of equity in this Dravidian model, there will be those who will say that is the Dravidian model able to adapt to the global economic shifts? The other big challenge going ahead is going to be job creation. Particularly private sector jobs will be increasingly needed if you are going to cater to this large so-called demographic dividend that exists in this country. Do you accept that the Dravidian model will also have to adapt to global economic shifts to make itself far more attractive, to make its young more entrepreneurial, more skilled, to adapt to a changing world? Or is it still about government jobs and equity?
No, it's absolutely not. But I just want to get Rajdeep to validate that I did not set up this question ahead of time, because he's lobbed up a softball that I'm going to slam out of the park.
You're welcome to do that.
Let me put it this way. In the last 5 years, I'll give you just two statistics. The Chief Minister has already spoken about the final outcome, which is 11.19% real GDP growth, not achieved by anybody, not close. And in the end, the outcomes decide whether you're doing your job right or not, right? You can't manufacture the outcome. You change the process, the outcome comes. The two statistics I want to mention, the number of registered startups, DPIIT registered startups in Tamil Nadu have gone up from 2,000 when we took office to over 12,000 today. That shows you that the entrepreneurial spirit and the spirit of innovation is thriving. We have never seen 6x growth like that. More important statistic, manufactured electronic goods output has gone up from under 2 billion to over 14 billion in 3 years. 3 years. Right? That cannot be done domestically. That has to be done because of global opportunity. It has to be done because the wave exiting China is so large. It's a tsunami. You catch some small portion of it and you're getting this huge lift. My point is exactly the opposite of what you're saying. I'm saying if you have a good society, if you have a good human capital base, you will benefit from every macro trend, from every globalization opportunity, from every liberalization. 1990 liberalization was when the South started to really separate from the rest. We all started poor. In fact, till the 70s, Tamil Nadu was one of the poorest states. Right? Only after you start liberalizing, only after you start getting degrees of freedom, the benefit of the social equity, inclusion, women's empowerment, women's participation. Look, if half your workforce or half your population is not able to join the workforce, and 70% of mine is, I win every single day. That's just math, right? So every opportunity that is coming, and we are benefiting hugely from global trends. I'm the first guy to accept. A large portion of our success in the last 3 years has been because of the macro trend that after the disruption of COVID and the general rise in fear of China, there has been a massive outflow, or at least a cutback of a 30-year trend going into China, and we are benefiting greatly from it. That's what we want.
Are you saying, therefore, that to go where we started off, that Tamil Nadu today is a far more attractive investment destination for private entrepreneurship, for FDI than Gujarat is? Because Gujarat has pitched itself as a far more attractive destination than you are.
No, Gujarat is... No. Take a separation between government investment and government-directed investment and government-incentivized investment and true private investment. In an efficient market, the money goes... Forget all the investment. Let's take the bank, okay? In Tamil Nadu, the credit to deposit ratio is greater than 100%, has been consistently. I used to run the state level banking committee. What does that mean? That means if all the Tamil citizens together are investing 100 rupees into deposits in banks, the banks are actually making 110 rupees worth of loans into Tamil Nadu. You know what that ratio is for places like UP? It's like 60%. That means even the UP people's money invested in the deposited in the UP banks are not being lent. The credit will go where the opportunity is. You can't force a banker to lend when there is not a good credit opportunity.
No, you brought in UP. I contrasted you to Gujarat.
No, take Gujarat. I guarantee you.
Advocates of Gujarat, for example, tell me the welfare spending in Tamil Nadu is such that the so-called, you call it welfare, they will call it freebies.
No
makes
problem.
your state far more fiscally unsustainable than a Gujarat is.
I agree that my fiscal metrics are not as good as Gujarat's. The consequence, one way or the other, is my multidimensional poverty is below 2%, this is above 12%. I have 4 doctors for every 1,000 people. They have, 1 for every 1,500 people. Most important statistic. More than 85, close to 90% of all young children, boys and girls, graduate high school. That number is less than 50% in Gujarat. Boys and girls. I don't mind. If I have to do debt financing, maybe if you're better, you do it with less debt. But if that is the outcome of debt financing, it is a much better and sustainable outcome.
So let me conclude by then asking you, when you pitch your state, and states are becoming more and more competitive with each other, each one of them, seems to go to Davos. I didn't see Tamil Nadu this time in Davos, and I wondered, with all these states coming to Davos, Maharashtra was there, Gujarat was there, even Assam was there, Jharkhand was there, why wasn't PTR there, or why wasn't MK Stalin there pitching Tamil Nadu as the most attractive investment destination? Are you all so complacent that the world is coming to Chennai, we don't need to worry about going to Davos?
It's not my department. I'm not the Minister for Industries, Investment, Promotion. So I won't answer that question. I'll say it a different way. Davos is Davos. Total FDI, the impact on output, whether it's manufactured goods, cars, electronic goods, manufactured electronic goods, cars, textiles, footwear, anything. We have seen huge multi-100% increases in the last few years. I'm saying last 3 to 5, I'm not talking about 20 years.
Yes.
We have benefited from global trends. I think the profound difference is that our mindset has always been global, right? We are a seafaring people. We have been doing this in the Kiladi dig in Madurai, which I'm sure you've seen, or if you haven't come, we have found Roman coins going back to, BCE, before the current era. So we are integrated into the global economy. We want to be. Sadly, the Prime Minister and his government don't actually coordinate and get the states together, because I say it again and again. The scale of global opportunity is so high that Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra, Telangana, Kerala, Pondicherry, Maharashtra, Gujarat can all grow at double digit, and we will still not be out of opportunity. There's still headroom. Just think about the scale of our economy to the scale of what is coming out of China and what had been the 20-year trend in China. So of course we compete for a particular project. But if you ask me, in the global set, KTR and his new replacement, Sridhar Babu, are good friends of mine. We help each other out. Priyank Kharge and I are good friends. We have never said, I'll beat you on this project. The Chief Minister holds IT portfolio in Kerala. He invites me to every conference, and we invite him here so that we can work closer together. Nara Lokesh, a personal friend of mine, he may get into slight tiffs now and then. But if I ask for help, he gives me help. I'm saying the opportunity set is so large that we can all, of course, we should compete for a particular project, but gross output, the opportunity set is so large, we can all benefit, and then still be room left to go and get the next deal.
So 30 seconds, the best thing about this Dravidian 2.0 model that you're building, and the one weakness, in a quick 30-second, what would you tell me?
Look, I think you got the 2.0 wrong. What the Chief Minister is saying is that when we come back, it will be the 2.0 version. But the point of all of this is, however good your model is, you have to do 3 things all the time. The first is you have to keep testing whether the model is actually in execution doing what you think it is. Number 2, you have to keep adapting to the times. The world keeps changing. You can't have one model stable. You keep trying to come up with new ways. I can give you many examples how we try to bring more girls into the education system. Averages are good, but state-educated girls were dropping out at high school. It's a long story. You have to keep checking and say, in the adapting times, what is it that I need to adapt my model to? And then if you have things like crises, like the COVID or like the GFC, crises always create unique opportunities also. It's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. A global crisis will create opportunities like we have had in the last 3-4 years. And so you got to be able to adapt to that situation that day. It is dynamic. That's why you need 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. Nothing stays the same. You have to keep adapting and fixing things that you're not doing that well and keep testing whether you're doing it well enough.
Okay. I'm going to leave it there, PTR, because it's interesting that you spoke about all these various ministers of the South being friends, not necessarily while competing in a way for potential projects. You remain friends and potentially creating a coalition, if I may call it, of these southern states. But you've given us a very broad overview, which I think is refreshing. And I hope this debate between the Dravidian model and the Gujarat model one day takes place with you on this side and maybe a Gujarat minister on the other. And we will look forward to that in the weeks ahead. We wish you well in the election. I know you have taken time off from your campaign in Madurai to join us here this morning in Chennai. Thank you very much. Please give a warm round of welcome to Palanivel Thiagarajan, the Minister for IT Services here in Tamil Nadu. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raj.
Thank you so much, sir.